What happens if we detect a technosignature tomorrow? What would be a realistic reaction? Could there be life on the moons of brown dwarf stars? And in Q&A Plus, how far will humans go from Earth, realistically? All this and more in this question show. It's time for the question show. Your questions, my answers, as always, wherever you are across my channel. If a question pops in your brain, just write it down. I'll gather them up and I will answer them here. All right, let's get into the questions. Page Potter, if we detected a technosignature tomorrow, what's the first thing scientists would argue about? Well, everything. Right? That detecting a technosignature is probably the most profound discovery that humanity has ever made. You are not alone in the cosmos, and that there is actually some other intelligent civilization that is out there, and they are maybe aware of our presence and are communicating in our general direction. That is a lot for us to take on. And any scientist, their first response to that will be skepticism. Are you sure? Is this real? Did you really detect this technosignature? And especially if it's something that is right at the very edge, the limits of our capability. If we detect the presence of chlorofluorocarbon in the atmosphere of some other world, then with James Webb at the very limits of its detection capability, then scientists are going to go, well, you know, these are the other chemicals that have similar spectral lines, and you could probably say that it was one of those, or maybe that there's noise in the equipment itself. But if we detect something that is unambiguous, that it, you know, I think about, say, Contact, right? The movie Contact, where you had this signal that is being sent from some other civilization, and that they've put binary code into the signal, and it's obvious that this is sent by some other intelligent civilization, then I think you will still see people who are skeptical, right? Is this some kind of hoax? Is this some kind of scam? That it's going to take a lot of scientific inquiry to get to the point that people can be very confident. But then I think the most important question that you have to ask is, should you reply? Should you let this civilization know that you are out there? And, you know, and this has shades of this idea of the dark forest, that, you know, that the universe, you know, when you think about the universe in terms of game theory and you detect the presence of another civilization, they could be a threat to you. And so the best thing you should do is strike first, strike hard, no mercy. You know, it's a ridiculous thought experiment, and there's all kinds of challenges and problems with the dark forest. David Kipping did a great response to this in Cool Worlds, and I largely agree with him that, you know, that there are other responses than we should take out that other civilization. But should we reply? Should we make them aware of us? Or is this a scam? And then I think if it is a message, something that, like when I think about the movie Contact, and it was the instructions for building a machine, and they would just like went ahead and built the machine. That sounds like a terrible idea. Do not build the machine. Because if you want to take out another civilization, send them instructions on a doomsday machine that'll wipe them out. That is so easy, right? All you have to do is just send them a bad idea. You don't have to fire your mega laser across light years of space. You don't have to send an armada to invade them. You just say, hey, build this thing. It'll be great. And then they build the thing, and it turns out to not be great. It turns out to, you know, produce a black hole and destroy your planet or whatever. So I would say that's where the point of where the scientists would be arguing is, should we reply? And then should we trust anything that is in the message that they are sending us? And you know, you may get to this place where you can't be safe. You can't know. Now people will just YOLO and want to try it anyway. And other people will be like, we shouldn't do it. And that's where I think the sticking point will be. It's a really interesting kind of philosophical thought experiment. And you know, maybe people can recommend some science fiction that handles it really well, because the science fiction, like, I don't think the Dark Forest handles it great, and Contact definitely doesn't handle it great. You know, it doesn't handle it well, but I would be interested to sort of hear people's thoughts on who handles this in a very good and nuanced way. Jim Dika, would we just blindly build it, or would we run experiments, tests, etc., with our info given in the message? I tend to think we wouldn't just blindly build our own device in full without check-in. Well, that's the magic of the bad idea. is that you, as the people who are sending the doomsday machine, is that you wouldn't tell people that it was going to doom them, and in fact you would hide its true purpose. But there are, I mean, even like our current race towards artificial intelligence is a great example of what is potentially a bad idea. That if in the future we can build artificial intelligence where the computers are able to take control of their own development and do research to make better artificial intelligence, then we will get to some place where we will potentially destroy our civilization. And so you can just send what seems like something good. When you think about, say, the Midas touch, right? Midas wanted to be able to, everything he touched would turn to gold, and it turned out to be horrible. He couldn't eat food, turned his daughter to gold. Like, it was a bad idea. And so what we think is a good idea, what even when we test it out in all ways, it seems like it's a good idea, has unintended consequences. And so if the civilization that's sending this to us knows the unintended consequences that will reveal themselves later on. There's this great description of artificial intelligence. I think Elazar Yudkowsky says it's like a machine that spits out gold until it lights the atmosphere on fire. So imagine if we got the design for a machine that spat out gold until it lit the atmosphere on fire. That is the kind of bad idea that is just too tempting. Even if you knew that it could light your atmosphere on fire, you might still build it because you want the gold until it lights your atmosphere on fire. And a lot of like what we're doing right now with AI, rushing headlong into this, not really thinking about the consequences, not taking it slowly and carefully, feels like we're on that run. Like, it feels like our current dance with artificial intelligence is as if an alien civilization sent us a bad idea and we are just operating it. That if you go and you talk to the people inside the AI companies, many of them say, I would like to slow down. We should pause. This is a bad idea. This is dangerous. And yet they still are rushing forward to do it because they're like, well, better I make the machine that lights the atmosphere on fire than somebody else does first. It's bananas. And yet that's the place where we find ourselves right now. So I think we have a great analogy for this. And this is this idea of an info hazard, that just by knowing a piece of information, you are at risk. And so if some advanced civilization sends us a bad idea, we are doomed. Because we just can't help ourselves. We just have to do it because we're so curious. It's time to shout out our new patrons at the $5 level and above. Roger Emailer, Don Adams, Timmy, Taoist, Tim Barber, Campbell Good, Bruce Lazarus, Spencer M, and Ekix. Join our community at patreon.com/universe today. Savor Forest. Will AI find alien life first? Astronomers will write machine learning algorithms that will help them find alien life. So think about, for example, trying to comb through all of the radio signals that are coming towards the Earth all the time. That there are signals across all of these different frequencies, across this entire spectrum, all these different sources that could be sending us signals across time. And we've got a lot of places to scan and just mountains and mountains of data to pour through. And that's why, I don't know if you remember back in the 2000s, there was SETI at home. You could download chunks of SETI data that had been recorded by these radio telescopes, and then your computer could crunch through them looking for signals. And then if it found anything interesting, report that back to the SETI researchers. And now a lot of that work is done with very large machine learning algorithms, artificial intelligence, but very purpose-driven to find these kinds of signals. And that when you think about all the different kinds of technosignatures, the potential technosignatures out there, a lot is going to require going through enormous amounts of data. You're going to want to look through, say, millions of stars all at the same time, looking for any that, for example, are communicating in radio waves, or the ones that are sending laser signals in our direction. Like the star is going to flash because they're firing a high power laser towards us, or that there is a strange shaped space station, like a triangular shaped space station that's passing in front of the star. It's going to be transiting in this way that's very bizarre. Or you're going to be trying to study and analyze the atmospheres of thousands of exoplanets looking for these chemical signatures. And it's too much for human beings to do. So we're absolutely going to rely on artificial intelligence. But then you sort of imagine, could we get to this place where artificial intelligence could actually do the finding for us? Can it come up with algorithms? Can it come up with methodologies? Can it code up solutions to problems where it can actually help find the signals from other life? And almost certainly, it becomes a coding challenge right now. And our artificial intelligence, the large language models are very good at coding. And a lot of astronomers are getting a lot of work done using these modern LLMs. So yeah, I think if we do find aliens, then AI will have had a big role to play in us finding them, but not sort of in the way you think. Like it's going to be custom built machine learning algorithms will do most of the heavy lifting of this. Terry Hardaway. Would there be a circumstellar habitable zone for Earth-sized moons around rogue brown dwarfs? Yes. So let's think about what you're dealing with here. So the habitable zone is this region around a star where liquid water can be present. And that region is, on the inner side of this, water boils. Venus is right at the edge of the habitable zone. And then on the outer edge, liquid water can just not be present, that you will always get frozen water. And Mars is just on the inside of the outside of the habitable zone. It's kind of amazing when you think about it that we have 3 planets that are located within the habitable zone of the solar system. Venus, Earth, and Mars are all potentially habitable if you tweak their atmospheres in different ways. But you could have a brown dwarf giving off infrared radiation. It's going to be hundreds of degrees on its surface, tens of degrees on its surface. It is going to be giving off heat. And then you could have a moon that is in orbit around that brown dwarf, and it's going to be experiencing some level of heat coming from it. But I don't think that's the one that's going to be doing the heavy lifting. I think where you're going to get probably a more productive contribution of heat is going to come from the tidal interactions between other moons in the brown dwarf system and the main brown dwarf. So think about Jupiter, right? Jupiter with Io and Europa and Ganymede and so on. Io is very close to Jupiter. It has lava on its surface. Europa comes next, and it has oceans of liquid water underneath a thick ice shell. Ganymede does too. Callisto almost certainly does as well. And so that is the kind of environment that's going to give you the heat. But I think what you're really hoping for is, could you get liquid water on the surface of this moon around this brown dwarf? And it really just depends on how much heat the brown dwarf is putting out and how close the moon is to the surface of the brown dwarf. It might have to be really close, but you can get very close and not be within the Roche limit of your brown dwarf. And so there's going to be a habitable zone. There will be a habitable zone around any kind of star. As long as it's warmer than liquid water, warmer than 0, it's going to have a habitable zone. But of course, your moons are going to be tidally locked to the brown dwarf, but then you have that with Jupiter as well. Did you know you can watch the same video with no ads and get a bonus question over on Patreon completely for free? And we call it Q&A Plus. And this week's bonus question: how far realistically will humans go from Earth? And I'll put a link in the show notes. All right, those are all the questions that we had this episode. Thank you everyone who put your questions into the YouTube comments, everybody who joined me for the live show. The live show is Mondays, 5 p.m. Pacific time. I'm going to be doing one show next Monday, and then I'm going to be off for a couple of weeks. So this is going to be your chance. Come join us. Now, I'm going to chat about a couple of books that I have read recently, but first, I'd like to thank our patrons. Thanks to Abe Kingston, Andrea Pedretti, Brian Bodie, Caradwin, Chuck Hawkins, Commander Baylock, Dark Finger, David Gilton, David Matz, Eric Lindstrom, Evan.pro, James Clark, Janice Smith, Jeremy Mattern, Jim Burke, Jordan Young, Josh Schultz, Marcel Sitz, Michael Purcell, Nordspace, OneStepForAnimals.org. Please follow my nephew at vbrick6994, Ren Kaidi, Richard Williams, Sean Sargent, Stephen Farley-Munley, Team 49, Telescopes Canada, Vlad Chiplin, Wolfgang Klotz, Zeldborg Galactic Defender, who support us at the Master of the Universe level, and all our patrons. All your support means universe to us. So I've been doing a ton of work outside, which is why I'm got quite the tan line. And so that means I'm listening to a lot of audiobooks. And so I have been grinding through a bunch of books over the last month. I read the first 2 Dune books again. So I read Dune and then I read Dune Messiah. And Dune is the perfect book. Like, I really feel like it is easily the best science fiction book ever written. And like, I know a lot of people love this book, and there's just so much to love about it. And then when you think about how this book was written so long ago, a lot of the genres, a lot of the big ideas that we think about in science fiction were provided in this book. Ideas about empire and dynasties and houses and the various weapons and aliens and the culture, and it goes on and on and on, and the book holds up. And I've been sort of going on a Dune obsession recently. So we rewatched the Denis Villeneuve Dunes, the new ones, and then I read Dune, and then we watched the 1984 version of Dune, and I think now I'm going to go back and watch the Denis Villeneuve ones again. I have them in 4K, and that'll be sort of prepare me to be ready for the third part of the series. But it's just like, if you've never read Dune, like if you like the movie, you're just going to love the book. And the other books get weird. I'll warn you in advance. They might not be your thing, but the first book is just so solid. So I can't believe I am recommending Dune, but Dune. And then the other pair of books that I've been reading, I read The Parable of the Sower and The Parable of the Talents by Octavia Butler. And this is a sort of post-apocalyptic series of novels written by Octavia Butler. She's a science fiction author. She passed away tragically. And it is so good. And it is chilling how well, in 1993, she predicted many of the things that we're seeing today, sort of the rise of authoritarian totalitarianism, the difficulty that people are having just getting by, inflation rising, and this general distrust, and then political factions starting to rise up, and it's sort of return of a lot of humanity's worst ideas. It's very similar to The Handmaid's Tale, but sort of approaches this problem in a different way. But it is just like, it's just so gripping, and you just read this story and you're right there in the moment, and you have a hard time distinguishing between what is reality and what is the book that you're reading. And when that happens, you know that a book is really, really good. So I wholeheartedly recommend this pair of books from Octavia Butler. All right. Hope you enjoy. Hope you're getting early in your summer reading, and we'll see you next time.